are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by for a drive time dialectic. I know you're all super excited, and it's another anniversary for me, and so you guys get to listen to me rant and rave a little bit as I do not drive distracted, but act like I'm having a conversation. Now, the reason that I say that is because this ties into a little bit of the topic of the night as I drive home for my and do my dialectic. So, as many of you know, last Thursday was the 4-year anniversary of the Minnesota Black Robe Regiment MBRR podcast. And a lot of you know, how do I want to say this? The reality is that my podcast, my show, my decision to speak out during 2020, during the COOF and all the other, and even during the Summer of Love, ultimately did end up costing me my career. But the cost of my career was prefaced by a slow burn, if you will, of an assault on my liberty based around the reality, the factual narrative that I did indeed work for the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office, the jurisdiction that I'm driving through right now as I'm doing this. And if you haven't gone and watched the playlist as it revolves around or as it pertains to my career and the loss of my career, then I would encourage you to go and listen to that. But in the meantime, for those of you that are just tuning in, I'm going to give a little bit of a brief amount of background, and if you guys can hear me, let me know, because I know driving can cause some road noise, and unfortunately that's what a drive time dialectic does. It gives us some road noise, right? But and thanks for those that are tuning in. Fear Porn, I see you here. Juggalaxis, I see you here. Chad, I see you here, and there are others watching. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for stopping by. Share it out if you would. So a little bit of background about what happened to me and why today's an anniversary. So in May of 2020, shortly after George Floyd died, I was approached and talked to about a video that I put out, and that video is I believe it's in my content somewhere, but I called out the mayor of Rochester for what I thought were, really dangerous and unhelpful comments that she made about the nature of law enforcement in Olmsted County. Now, I was in a different place then, but I still stand by those comments. The comments that she made were irresponsible, and they were inflammatory, and they were geared that way. And so I called her out while doing a kind of a drive time dialectic on Facebook. I went live on my way home the next morning after hearing these comments. And that night, that Saturday night, I was approached by Chief Deputy Brian the Coward Howard. And it came down to, well, you got to be careful with your comments, and many of you know this. And also, you drove distracted. And I asked for an explanation about what he meant by driving distracted, and what he meant by driving distracted was the fact that I drove while doing a video. Now, I looked at him and I said, all the other things that you brought for criticisms are invalid, and I told him that, but I'll while I work for the sheriff's office. I give you my word. And it did not happen for as long as I worked for the sheriff's office. So that was in May of 2020, and I sent a letter on June 5th of 2020 asking for clarification about all the other things that he critiqued. And if you guys are really interested, please go, like I said, find the playlist that details what happened to me and how I ended up losing the career. And So you fast forward then to the February of 2021, and I was summoned to the conference room by my sergeant to meet with the sergeant and the chief deputy. And there again, the unredacted video of that is up as well, where I call him out for never talking to me and giving me the clarification that I asked for after the meeting at the end of May. And in February, I think it was 19th, if I remember correctly, they told me I was being placed under disciplinary step notice. In other words, my job could be on the line if I didn't modify, curtail, or change my social media content and my commentary. And so a week later, when after again asking for clarification about what was allowed and what was not allowed, not willing to acquiesce that they had any right to control anything that I said, because I had already consulted with my attorney, who had told me, as long as you're not violating their policy and procedures, they can't touch you. And legally, at least. Doesn't mean they can't bring the heat and try and make your job uncomfortable. So a week after I asked for clarification, I finally go to get the clarification, and they ultimately placed me under internal investigation on the 24th of February. And they kept me on internal investigation for 60 days. There again, I'm rehashing. Some of you already know all of this. They kept me on internal investigation, but also kept me on duty. Kept me on duty during that time, which when you're a deputy working as a sworn deputy inside of a detention center and you're under internal investigation, everything that you do, is being watched. They're watching you for signs of stress. They're watching you for signs of weakness. They're going to use anything they can against you. So in that 60 days of investigation, they had hired an outside attorney, a private attorney out of the Twin Cities. Her company is called, I think it's Soldo, SOLDO Consulting. And she's an attorney, and she specializes in witch hunts. This is according to my attorney that was provided to me because of the association that the sheriff's deputies had. This attorney was provided to me, and he specialized in dealing with disciplinary issues. And he said, I've dealt with this woman before, and she's a witch. She's an absolute witch. They hired her very intentionally. And so they hired a private attorney to investigate me. And imagine, in 2021 prices are today, that's probably $250, $300 an hour for 60 days to investigate me. They gave me a hearing, an interview where I was put under what's called garrity. And in that, I agreed to cooperate and answer all questions. And the attorney had to interrupt her numerous times and challenge her and basically told her, look, you're not investigating. You're not asking investigatory questions. You're prosecuting him as if you're arguing for his termination already. And after not even a week after that interview, she finalized her investigation, gave the final report to the sheriff's office, and I was placed on administrative leave on April 30th. It was a Friday, April 30th of 2021. So a year and a week from launching my channel, I was placed on administrative leave for exercising my free speech. And I had already begun to come to a place where the scales had fallen off my eyes when it came to the state and when it came to law enforcement in particular. And I've described it as, for those of you that are Christian, this is going to seem rote and probably playing a little fast and loose. And for those of you that are Christian and don't care for Christianity, you just have to bear with me, because my brain still at times does think in very philosophically Christian examples. And so Saul of Tarsus, who many know as Paul, had what they call the road to Damascus experience. Paul was traveling to Damascus to persecute the early Christian church. That's what he was doing. He thought he was doing God's work, and he was on the road to Damascus to persecute the early Christians, literally overseeing the execution and the death of any that he found to be guilty of being Christian. And in this account, Paul meets Christ, the ascended Christ, crucified, died, buried, raised again, ascends into heaven. Paul attests that he met Christ, and Christ blinds Paul and sends him on to Damascus, where he is then healed, and his healing is described as the scales falling off. So if you've ever used that phrase, the scales fell off my eyes, the scales fell off her eyes, his eyes, whatever the case might be, that's where that's from. And so I had that experience. My road to Damascus, in trusting the state and understanding how corrupt the state was, my road to Damascus experience had already begun. I had been seeing things in the criminal justice system, in law enforcement. And law enforcement, criminal justice, they are the same. They go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. And I use the term criminal justice in a couple of ways. One, criminals are in the justice system, but the justice system is criminal. And law enforcement is part of that. And I had begun to question the validity of the criminal justice system. I had begun to question whether there was any justice in the justice system. I knew the war on drugs was a sham. I could no longer wrap my mind around the idea that a guy who had 5 1-ounce baggies of marijuana for personal use somehow was a massive drug offender and needed to be imprisoned at the cost of the taxpayers for years on end. While at the same time, people who are guilty of SA, and if you don't know what SA is, think of a very not derogatory, but a very descriptive term, especially as it's directed towards children. But people who are guilty of SA towards children or even adults were getting sometimes probation with no jail time, no prison time at all. And drug offenders were, being set up for years. And not to mention, vets who were drug offenders, but were dealing with massive amounts of PTSD-related trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. They have these brain injuries that's what PTSD is. It's a brain injury. I was watching all of this take place, and I'm going, like, these guys, they need help. They don't need to go to prison. They need help. And even the idea of a veterans court at the time in Olmsted County, was laughable. People would laugh at you, like, no, these guys don't need, special treatment for that. And so I had just moved to the place where I'd started to question. And even in that year leading up to being placed on administrative leave, I had started to make comments about law enforcement across the country. I didn't name names. I didn't name agencies in particular. As far as in the case of defending my friend Lisa Hansen, I did call out the prosecutor. I did call out the local law enforcement, J.D. Carlson of the Albert Lee, Minnesota Police Department, their chief and their director of safety. I did call them out because what they were doing was crooked and dirty. But I wasn't calling out my agency. I wasn't calling out every agency. I was just pointing out the fact that it was law enforcement that was enabling the shutdowns, that was enabling the mask mandates, that was enabling the stay-at-home orders, that was enabling the restrictions on the number of people that you could have in your home. And rightly so, because it was a matter of great public interest. What's happening here? And if you guys watched my show last night and have heard me comment before, the reality is that nobody, no politician, no governor, no city council, no mayor, no county board chair, no county director or administrator, and none of those people have any power without also having the power of the state, or excuse me, the power of law enforcement to enforce those things. That applies to the Supreme Court. Like, the Supreme Court can pass a ruling all day long. They can pass rulings all day long. And there's no way for the Supreme Court to enforce that ruling. They cannot enforce rulings. They have to trust in the idea of law enforcement to back up even their rulings. And we've seen that play out with Joe Biden declaring that he was going to give immunity, really, loan forgiveness to college students. He's just going to forgive loans, and the Supreme Court said, you don't have the power. That's unconstitutional. And he just ignored him and did it anyway. Well, what are they going to do? Haul the president in front of the Supreme Court and hold him in contempt? Like, that's not going to happen. It's just not. It's like the idea of President Trump, like him or not, going to prison, being in prison, going to jail. Like, that's not going to happen, because he's entitled to, for the rest of his life, he's entitled to Secret Service protection, which they are admittedly trying to strip from him. And it's just, these things aren't going to happen. So you can't hold a president in contempt. Like, they can show all the contempt in the world, and they can't. So the only thing that actually gives power to any person in the state is the backing of law enforcement. And I watched this take place. I watched it happen, and I called it out. I even said in a post on Facebook, which of course they found right away, and called me out for it in the disciplinary process. You said that taxes are basically theft, and they're collected through the threat of force. And if you fail to pay your taxes, men with guns and badges will come to your house and arrest you and imprison you. And eventually, if you're found guilty of tax evasion, men with guns and badges will haul you off to actual prison to execute your sentence. And it was funny because my attorney said, like, he's not wrong. What is he saying that's wrong? And their argument was, well, it makes law enforcement look bad. Let that sink in, folks. Their argument, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, it makes law enforcement look bad. It causes you to discredit yourself. And there was talk of Brady listing me, which means I would have never been able to testify in court. My employer didn't have the grounds initially to terminate me in their mind, so they had to trump up these things, no pun intended. They had to trump up these things, and one of them was talk about maybe even possibly being Brady listed. You're going to be unreliable and not testify in court. And so within a year of corruption in the system, within a year of talking about the executive branch and the judicial branch and the legislative branches in the state of Minnesota and across the United States, Republican or Democrat, it didn't matter, talking about these people and deal with these things and trying to wrestle with these things as I remained on board in the law enforcement community cost me my job. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I'm going to have to take my sunglasses off, even though they're prescription sunglasses. I can't read this very well. I have not had a super chat of this size in an incredibly long time. Aiden says, and Aiden, do I know you? Glad to hear you came around from the blue side to the good side. It takes a lot of courage, more than most would know. Keep up the good fight. BCNN is the best in business. Aiden, you are probably someone that I know through BCNN. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm actually kind of moved right now. I don't think I've ever had a super chat. No, that's not true. I actually have had a super chat from my friend, Pirate Tomsky in Great Britain of that size. So I'm humbled, and I'm going to leave it up there. You guys are just going to have to look at it. I'm humbled and honored. So thank you very much. I needed that today. So yeah, the scales had started to come off my eyes. And so here I am, I'm talking about the corruption in the system. And to prove that they're all good cops, to prove that the system is not corrupt, they came after me. Right? So that's what happened. I had begun to see these things come around, and I had started to talk about them. There again, not naming, Sheriff Kevin Torgerson of the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office, who is a dirty piece of swine. I am personally working on making the hashtag thick blue swine. Thick blue swine. Thick, stupid, dumb, slow, blue, obviously, and swine, because obviously. So we're going to hashtag thick blue swine. So if you guys want to share this out with the hashtag thick blue swine, that would be great. So yeah, Kevin Torgerson is thick blue swine. So is, Chief Deputy Brian Howard. He's thick blue swine. I had begun to see all of this garbage taking place and talking about it, and they came for me to prove that they weren't corrupt. They did corrupt things. They accused me of basically criminal behavior. And even stated, and what they pulled HR in what's called a Loudermill hearing, where they're going to tell me, here, we're going to terminate you, and here's why. I'll give us a defense. And that Loudermill hearing, and all of this stuff, guys, I've done so much research on this, and so if I'm talking at you in terms that you are going, what the hell does that mean? So Loudermill hearing, it refers to an individual, Loudermill, I can't remember what state it may have been, Massachusetts or New York, Loudermill v. somebody. They had to have a Loudermill hearing. Basically, it's a kind of a little without a judge, and you have a right to defend yourself. And my attorney said for the first time he was going to have me actually speak to my own defense during the Loudermill hearing. He said, normally I won't let anybody do that, but and so I spoke to my own. Okay, there we are. If you can hear me, bear with me. So, Julian, I'm driving through the bluffs, and I'm just on the reception here. Means I'm getting very close to him. So Julian said, what if we had proof? We had evidence that you broke the law. And I'm like, first I reject your premise, which, if you don't know, is a reference from the philosopher King of, I say King just because he was badass, from Atlas Shrugged. I said, I reject your premise. If you had proof that I'd committed a crime, I would have been terminated and arrested already. I said, but I know for a fact that the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension was contacted about me, and I know for a fact that the FBI was contacted about me, and no one's touching this, that no one is willing to go any further than what you guys are doing. You just want to terminate me because you don't like what I have to say. So bring your proof. Bring your proof. I reject your premise. I said it to him several times. I reject your premise. Bring your proof. And he would not They would not show me what proof they had of my criminal action. They accused me of things. They accused me of criminal, basically stalking. They accused me of doxing the city attorney of Albert Lea because I had made the comment, look, we're going to find out who your political affiliations are and who you owe your allegiance to, which is what investigative journalists and commentators do, right? Right? But that's what they do. And my attorney even said that. He's not doing anything that a journalist won't do. And they just tried. They just tried. And they just didn't have it. And the FBI and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension had no desire to be part of it. And even they knew, as corrupt as the FBI and the BCA are, they knew. And so they told me, like, we're going to terminate you. And the great thing was, I had veterans benefits. So even if they terminated me, they had to pay me. So the entire time that I was out on administrative leave, awaiting a final termination notice, I was getting paid. And that was a very good summer for me, not because I was getting paid to not work, because I missed my team and I missed what was going on, but because it gave me so much time to read and research and do more work. And it finally, like, I can never go back into that line of work. And that's why I continued during that summer and into that fall of 2021 and into 2022 and 2023 and 2024. I've just come to the place where the state is corrupt. I was a statist, folks. And I had used this analogy a couple of weeks ago on my season premiere Monday Night Musings. But, I had a family member who was a smoker. And this family member decided to quit smoking, and they became so stridently anti-smoking that you're not allowed to smoke in their home. Like, you're not allowed to smoke in my home just because it's my home and I don't like smoke. But this person went from being a smoker to becoming so stridently against smoking that not only do you not get to smoke in their home, but they call out smoking. And that's kind of where I am. I was a statist. And I could speak with great authority on statism. I could speak on great authority what it means to be a statist. I could speak with great authority of what it means to be part of the thin blue line and back the blue. I could speak with great authority on what it is to be a bootlicker. I could speak with great authority on what it means to go into social media and make comments and say, you don't understand what this officer was going through. You don't understand what this officer had to deal with. You don't know what kind of day they had. All the while knowing in the back of my mind, as I was changing, my philosophy was changing, speaking in the voice in the back of my mind telling me, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. Don't be the person that defends them at all costs. And I was experiencing cognitive dissonance. I was experiencing an internal hell where I could not wrap my mind around what I was seeing and what it was making me feel, but at the same time turning around and still having to feel the need to defend law enforcement in moments where it was impossible for me to feel any comfort, any peace in making those defenses. And it was terrible. It was honestly terrible. And as hard as it was to go through that year and a half, almost 2 years of this persecution, I'm really thankful for it. I'm incredibly thankful for it because it made me a better man. It really did. It made me a better man. It made me a better philosopher. It made me a better political strategist. And it made me powerfully aware of what the system will do to anyone, especially anyone inside of the system that runs afoul of it. And if they'll do that to one of their own, what will they do to you, right? What will they do to you? And so now I'm not going to shut up. I'm not going to stop. I mean, I've already made the sacrifices, right? If you've made the sacrifices, why stop? Why quit? Why change course? Nothing's going to make me turn now and say, you know what? I was totally wrong for the last couple of years. For the last 4 years, I've been totally wrong. I got it all wrong. And you guys just have to trust me. Listen to me now. Forget everything I said for the last 4 years. I'm pulling in a little parking spot because I'm going to go use my Upside. If anybody doesn't use Upside and you'd like to use Upside, let me know and I will send you a link to Upside, and then we can mutually benefit one another. So I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change where I'm at. And I talk to more and more people every day who are there, whether it be on the issue of corruption as it relates to the military industrial complex and the war machine that is both the GOP and the DFL, whether it's got to do with law enforcement. I talk to people every day who are in law enforcement who are out now. I talk to people who are still in law enforcement who are looking for a way out, but they don't know how to wrap their mind around how to get out and not lose everything. And that's a reality. When you hear people talk about, oh, cops don't get paid enough, look, people, they pay cops plenty, and there are lots of benefits, and that's why they stay in. That's ultimately why they stay in. Because the cognitive dissonance can be abated with the muting of good pay and benefits, especially the pension. And that's a hard truth. We just have to wrestle with that. We have to wrap our minds around it. It's a really hard truth, and people don't want to hear it. But I'm not going to stop. And in fact, if you ever hear me come out and say I'm done, I'm going back to being a statist, I'm going back to be a back to blue at all costs, no matter what person, look at the date, because it might be April 1st, or they've kidnapped my grandchildren and are threatening to kill them. I mean, that's the only thing that would get me to do that publicly. And you guys can say what you want, but my gears will be turning it as a way to rescue my grandchildren at the same time. Like that's just how I am. But that, like, it's either April Fool's or I've been pushed into a corner to defend life in that regard. They come from me, like I'm not suicidal. I'm not suicidal, and I'm not planning on taking any trips and disappearing without telling anybody. I'm not going to go become missing 411 fodder. So I'm just going to keep going. And right now my fight might be local. If you watched the stream last night, it might be about chickens. Which, by the way, if you don't follow me on Twitter, or Twix, I call it Twix now. If you don't follow me on Twix, you can follow me at Robe Regiment there. I'm going to be launching a new Facebook at some point, very, very soon. I have a few memes that a friend of mine put together for me. It may involve a bulldozer and chickens. I'm just going to leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, so maybe it's going to come down to, maybe my stand my ground moment is over chickens, and whether or not the state and her enforcement agents have the power to tell me I can't have chickens. This is like, folks, this is where we make a difference. It's in the small places. It's the small battles. Yeah, we might win some really big victories here and there, these big battles once in a while, but the places where we win are the small ones, where you stand up and expose corruption in your neighborhood. You stand up and point out the corruption in your neighborhood, in your local state, and your municipal state, your county state. You point out the corruption. You go to your school board meetings. You go to your county board meetings. You go to your city council meetings. You go find a way to go and testify in front of the House or the Senate and call out when they're talking about passing another law that strips you of even more of your natural right to keep and bear arms, even more of your natural right to speak your mind, even if it's unpopular as all hell. I'll say it again. I'm not for people infringing on other people's liberties, but I don't think that the state has the power to tell you that you can't say racist stuff. Let the free market sort out your racism. But the state doesn't get to tell you can't say racist stuff. If a black person wants to say racist things about white people or Asians, let them. If a Jewish person wants to say racist things about Asians or white people, let them. If a white person wants to say racist things about black people and Jewish people, let them. What who's it hurt? And why does the state need to be involved in telling you that you can't? As long as you're not physically aggressing other people. These are the things that I've learned in 3 years of exposing corruption. 3 years, 4 years really, of really exposing it and talking about. But in the last 3 years, since they put me out on paid administrative leave on the grounds of terminating me, you have to do this. It can't be about just TCs. It can't just be me. It can't just be Flex, Bo from Flex Your Freedoms. It can't be just BCNN people. It can't just be Bailey in Iowa. It can't just be Nate down in Bellevue, Nebraska, who I'm going to be having him and his wife, or excuse me, his girlfriend on Monday night. And I'll try and put a link to their channel here with what they exposed with the Bellevue Police Department just the other day. Like a gal that I'm talking to in Oklahoma, her entire town is corrupt. The school board, the school district, the police, the mayor, the city council, they're all colluding in their corruption. Look, it can't just be me. It's got to be you. It's got to be you. Like, we are responsible for the condition our republic is in because we have sat back for far too long and done far too little. And so now, as more and more and more people are awakened to the corruption of the state, from the elected and appointed servants to the law enforcement agents who are the military of the state, to be used against you, it's our responsibility for the direction that this country has gone, and it's our responsibility to change that, and we change it at the local level. We change it at the most basic root, and that is your city and your school board and your county commission. It's your planning and zoning committee. It's your library board. It's all of those things. That's where we fight the corruption. That's where we make the changes. Go out and get involved. That's my takeaway from the last 4 years, but especially the last 3. That's the takeaway. Go and make a difference. Fight the small fights because those are the fights that matter. One big battle doesn't win the war. They're going to win through attrition that way. That's how they win. They just wear you out. So band together, fight together, go out and make a difference. So that's the only way that anything can change. Once again, Aiden, thanks so much for that really generous super chat. And folks, thanks for tuning in for this Drive Time Dialectic. A little bit of a history lesson, a little bit of me telling you, what I did wrong and how bad I was and how my mind had changed. But it's a little of me challenging you and chastising you and then encouraging you. Don't be responsible for this continuing. Be the change. To quote Spike Cohen, the great libertarian activist here in the United States, You are the power. You are the power to make these changes. No one else is going to do it. If we're just all going to sit around and wait, no one else is going to care enough to do it. So, my friends, until next time, fight for your freedom. It is yours. Fight for your liberty. It belongs to you. Until next time, Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at